So the way I've thought of this, what I wanted to kind of speak more about is on what is our learning as Samagra on governance itself. Of how does governance transformation happen? To take about 10 minutes, just lay the context for what Samagra does, so that what's to come is anchored on some context there. So the large part of what I'm going to speak about is our learning on governance transformation itself, of what we think is working as from a very practitioner's lens. So please don't hold me accountable to the high standards of academic rigor. It's coming from more experience of doing things. So there might be words here and there that might mean scientifically very different, but
don't worry, Nikhil, we'll catch you and call you
yeah.
hot coals whenever you miss some of these.
Yeah. So quickly about Samagra. So our mission is to improve the quality of life of citizens through better governance, and that's a larger. So we work across different domains, but with the key stakeholder being the government, whether it's state, national, whatever. Right. Some of the work that we have done is this one is in Haryana, where it's transforming scheme and service delivery in the state. There is a single platform for all of the 600, 550 plus schemes and services that Haryana government delivers to its citizens. All of them go through what is called a Saral portal. You can see this online as well, saralharyana.nic.in. And there are these single points of contact, which are physical touch points across the state, where also it's almost a McDonaldized version of service delivery. You go any Saral Kendra in the state, you will have the same exact experience, right? So that's one work that we have done. This was 2017 to 2019. The other work that we are doing is in UP, which is Nipun Bharat now, the erstwhile Mission Prerna when we started it. It is the first holistic statewide program focused on foundational literacy and numeracy. Right, Nipun Bharat came about a few months later. Not like this was linked to that, but just similar. What you would have read about Nipun Bharat is true for Mission Prerna as well. Right. The other work that we are doing is in Odisha in agriculture. Susan, we had spoken about this on how do you increase farmers' income by getting governments to use data and evidence to make better decisions, right? So there's a decision support system, which is a technology plus set of processes that the government adopts to make better decisions in terms of input, in terms of credit, and so on and so forth. Right? Kalia, some of you might have heard of, just before PM Kisan was announced a couple of months before that, the Odisha government had distributed almost similar benefits to its farmers as well.
Yeah, I think this was the same. This came immediately after the Right to Bandhu scheme in
Correct,
Telangana.
correct. They had all a couple of months after the other. They were in series just before the PM Kisan got launched.
So, did you guys have any presence in Telangana on
No,
the Right to Bandhu scheme?
no, we did not have it, but we had studied it in detail before we had started working on Kalia.
Got it. Because we also did some work. We tried to quantify the impact. It was a pretty tough thing, but we should discuss about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Then another work in UP is on Niramaya, which is focused on improving the quality of nurses that come out of UP. And this is a little different approach on how do you solve for medical, the health space. The trouble that UP is facing is that the number of nurses per lakh population is very low. So we are looking at how do you kind of increase that from a very there is a regulator in UP who manages this. So we are working with the regulator to kind of move better accreditation, better admissions, and so on. Another work from Haryana is the whole Chief Minister's Good Governance Associate, CMGGA. This is the longest running governance fellowship in India. This is, I think, the seventh cohort. Yeah, the seventh cohort that is running as of now. In fact, when I joined Samagra, this was my first program. It was just starting. 2016 is when it started. So that's when that was my first program. So this is very close to my heart. Sorry. Yeah.
I know maybe this is distracting, but what is the Haryana program doing?
Which is the previous one that you're talking about? Saral.
Yeah. No. The CM's Good Governance.
So the idea is here, Susan, that these fellows are mapped to the district administration in every district. So one fellow almost per district. So 22 associates. It's a 1 year to this year. It's a 2-year program, but usually it's a 1-year program. and there is a state level program team as well, which is Samagra's team. So these associates at the district level, state level, Samagra team, they work in tandem with the Chief Minister's office on priority schemes and services of the government. So for instance, when I was there in the first year, one of the things that we worked on was transformation of road transport services delivery, right? The whole driving license, learner's license, uh, NOCs for trucks and so on. It was all varied, and transport department, I think, is the fourth most corrupt in the entire country, right? So how do you get all the services standardized, uniform, online and so on? So that was one thing where all the associates were working. So within a span of almost 9 months, we went from looking at all the issues to getting it changed entirely, just because this tandem was there of there being a team at the center and then there being teams in every district almost. So that's the work. So it's almost like a pipe which supports and catalyzes government at both levels, at the state and then at the district.
Got it. Okay. And this can be across any scheme or any.
Yeah, absolutely. At any given point, the associates are working for roughly about 4 to 5 such schemes and services in parallel.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the last example. So these are just some samples so that I can show the diversity of what we are doing, and then that add context to what I want to speak later. So this is the family ID thing that we are looking at. So this is again for services and scheme delivery of governments. So from a citizen point of view, while the services and schemes might be straightforward, that I get it, I mean, you can make it online, you can make it one click, whatnot. But from a government point of view, these are actually very disjointed, siloed activities as of today. So on the government side, what is happening is that all the delivery of these schemes and services also look at family as a starting point. It's not just individual identification. It's also looking at, okay, this family already has a certain benefit. So the person in that family is no longer eligible or is eligible. So this kind of puts extra onus on the individuals to prove that they're from a certain family, a certain caste, or a certain community. So hence we are trying to put together an individual family ID which can tag some attributes. It's not a centralized database as such, more having some attributes which are tagged so that the person doesn't have to prove n number of things again, right? And from the government side as well, the delivery can be proactive instead of being more pull based, so to speak. So that's the other program. There's some work that we did during COVID as well with Government of India in Delhi, looking at the oxygen supply and so on. Now, finally, some common characteristics. So this work is been for over 10 years now. Samagra has been, we started late 2012. So we completed 10 years last year. We'll be completing 11 in December. So across all of our program, there are some common characteristics, right? One is a very strong pull from the government side, and we define strong pull in two dimensions. One is that there is a chief minister's mandate that he or she wants to work on this. They commit to wanting to do this, right? That's one thing across all the programs that I've spoken about. The second thing is that there is a strong bureaucratic champion in that space, right? A very senior bureaucratic person who's kind of taken it up, who's given the mandate by the government to drive the delivery of that program. That's one common characteristic. The second common characteristic is that funding is always philanthropic for a dedicated team to drive this program, which is essentially Samagra's team. And we always intend to keep it this way. We don't want to take any money from the government for the reason, two reasons. One, we are at an arm's length distance from the government, right? We don't want to be part of the government. We don't want to replace them at any point in time. The second reason is also this allows us to play a very partnership role as opposed to a vendor role. The moment you take money from the government, there is some dynamic that start playing, or the other you don't get to speak right, truth to power. So that's the second thing that's common. The third thing is we co-create a roadmap for that particular goal, which has both administrative and technical levers. So if I'm talking about education, I would talk about administrative levers like what's the configuration of the school, how many teachers per school, what kind of mentors, blah, blah, blah. And also technical or academic levers in this case to say, okay, what kind of assessments, what kind of curriculum, and things like that, right? So both together become a roadmap which is co-created with the government themselves. That's the third common thing. The fourth thing is our focus is on catalyzing change and then sustaining it within the system. Right? So you first get the system moving to a certain momentum, on a certain journey, and then as part of that process, start embedding some new ways of life almost for the system there. So that's the fourth common thing. The fifth is all of this happens in terms of deeper reforms in 2 to 3 year transformation waves. So it's not like we are there for 1-2 years and everything is sorted. So a wave happens. That's how we look at it. That 2 to 3 years there's a wave, a certain set of changes happen, and then there's another wave which enables the next set of reforms. Right. So that's how this is common. Yeah.
Nikhil, can I ask what is the oldest program that you have? So am I hearing you right in saying that any program that you've started, you will have it running all through, even today?
Not all of them. Not all of them. For instance, Saral is something that we have handed over now, because we believed that after I think we did 2 waves of it. We reached a place where we felt that it is now fully sustainable there. So we handed it over. Today, all government schemes and services that Haryana does, including new ones that they keep launching, happens through that system.
Got it. And so, how long is a wave as you are
defining?
2 to 3 years.
One wave is 2 to 3 years.
Okay, got it. So that means that in Haryana, you were there for 2 waves. That is about 6 years.
That is about 6 years, correct.
And do you find, of course, it will be that you will see different experiences with different states. I suppose larger states will be more difficult.
Yeah. So the largest is UP right now. UP, we have been there only for 2.5 years, if I'm not wrong. So so even one wave, so to speak, has not completed yet. But let's see how the largest states turns out to be. In Odisha is the other longest serving state for us. There we are in the second wave right now. So Kalia and what I showed here was actually the first wave. So currently the second wave is kind of going on.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's something that the income benefit transfer scheme is something that we should really talk about. Because, because, okay, we'll talk.
Yeah, I'm just noting it down as we speak on this.
Yeah.
So apart from that, we have something called a Samagra X, where we house our GovTech and DataGov work. What does this team do? It supports all of those programs from a very technology and data lens, which means 2 things. They support the governments on advisory, what kind of tech to build, what kind of vendor to bring on board, how does oversight of that vendor happen, blah blah blah, and also demonstrating some possibilities. That here is a ChatGPT that has just gotten launched. Can you put it together to provide farmer advisory services? Right, here is a demo version of it to kind of unlock possibilities for the government to visualize that this is also possible. Once they are convinced, then it is taken over by the program team, which then works with the government to then get on a vendor who will build it and so on. So those are the 2 things from support. The other thing that the Samagra X team does is run independent programs focused on DPGs. This is something, for instance, the medical nurses work that I spoke about. There's a DPG that is planned to be coming out of that. So this is the team that is working on that particular thing. Digital public good. Sorry, my bad. So digital public goods are technology platforms, protocols, products, and all put together which serve a public good. UPI is an example of a DPG.
But this is what you said you're using or building for the nurses program in UP.
That's one example. Yeah. The other, let me.
Running in multiple programs.
No. So across multiple programs, Susan, is this. So where the team supports the existing programs on technology advisory or demonstrating possibilities. What does a possibility look like? This is the example that I gave of using GPT, Bhashini, and UCI to do conversational Odia language bot for farmers. You would see it playing on the left side, that image. Right, the farmer asks a question and then it responds and so on. Right. The other is this Nipun Lakshya app, which you could also download, which helps teachers. This was built in collaboration with Google. It helps teachers do voice-based assessment of grades 1 to 3 in Hindi and numeracy. Right. So the other thing is independent programs. These are some of the programs. So capacity building DPG is in the left bottom thing, which is the one that I spoke about. Other than that, You have Prashnavali, which is a question bank, so to speak, for education. So it's similar. Okay, so that's the short of thing. Before I get into governance framework, any quick questions on Samagra itself?
No, I think it's remarkable that you guys, without having funding from government, have raised sufficient funds to run these programs. So, can I ask, Nikhil, what is the team strength
So
today?
as of today, we are about 160.
Okay, across all of these programs.
Across these and some more as well.
So when you talk about the fellows program, the fellows are not Samagra staff.
No,
right?
so that program is actually in collaboration with Ashoka University and Government of Haryana. So Ashoka University is the one which has the fellows, and we work almost in tandem with the university and the government to run the fellowship.
Got it. No, but I think it's quite remarkable because I think that it is an important element that you should not be seen to be taking funding from the government because then they get to dictate terms.
Correct,
But
absolutely.
be able to have pulled together the independent funding to run this on a, I mean, I must congratulate you and your team because I think it's quite cool.
No, thank you so much. It is tough if I have to be candid. But yeah, that's one of the, that's why I said it's one of the common characteristic that's intentful as well from our side, that we don't want to do it. We did try in between. We thought, does it work, does it not work? We did look at some of the things and we realized that it doesn't work.
Okay. Yeah. And so, can I then ask, is the DPG something that you think is integral to the effort, or is it something that has been a recent addition? What is your take or your assessment of the notion of digital public goods being a tool that is part of the entire Samagra?
Yeah, so from Samagra's side, Susan, it has actually evolved, the whole angle on technology and data, right from 2017 when we started Saral as a program. That's when we first got this whole thing around technology being a lever of unlocking impact, and that's where we got our hands dirty, understood how technology within governments work, what works, what doesn't work, and so on. And that's when we conceptualized the idea of Samagra X, that there is a need to have GovTech and data gov work, dedicated work with the government. And we actually evolved the hypothesis over a period of years of what works, doesn't work, right? Then the whole DPG thing came.
That's very interesting because I think that means at the start of Samagra, when you started your first projects,
yeah,
your engagement was on more other things. It was not about a tech deployment.
No.
Okay.
In fact, our first state government program was education reforms in Himachal. That's where we started, and then came CMGGA, if I'm not wrong. And then from CMGGA, it moved on to Digital Haryana, under which we did Saral.
And that's where you started developing an idea of DPGs?
No, that's when we started developing an idea of how does technology work in governments. Okay. So in fact, Saral is entirely built by NIC. There is no DPG in Saral. It's actually fully built by NIC and owned by them, everything, right? But that's also learning that it happened only in Haryana. And that's when it started evolving, and then we got onto this understanding that okay, DPG makes better sense in the government structure. So our learning was similar, what DPGs were also providing were similar, so it almost became serendipitous that way, that what we were learning bottom up and what was happening top down ended up being the same.
So when you develop a DPG under Samagra X, is that something that goes into the public domain? And I mean, by definition, I suppose that's true.
Yeah.
But you're visualizing development of a system that you can then see being deployed in other states.
Absolutely. That's how, in fact, that's why even the Pukar work excited us, Susan, of building that DPG for more states.
Got it. So coming back, I think I cut you off. When is it that at Samagra you decided that DPG and tech systems,
Yeah.
what's something that you would make part of your core business?
To the core business, I would say just about when Saral started. Okay. We started putting together the team. At that point in time, we internally called it CTT, Central Tech Team. It was not Samagra X then, but I think after a year of doing Saral, we started kind of seeing it as Samagra X and so on. So from a business standpoint, it was very early on.
Okay.
DPG, I would say probably 3 years back.
Okay.
I mean, again, it's a little organic, not like we had a cut off. Today we'll start.
Yeah. I mean, we do what we think is right.
Yeah.
It keeps changing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because you have these programs or schemes that do different kind of things, right? Your products or output for each of it is different. And when you say you close something, so what is it? What defines it? Number of people onboarded the platform.
No, so the way we look at technology is not technology in itself. It's more an enabler for impact for us. For example, the Nipun Lakshya app that I was talking about, which does assessment for kids, right? The reason we even got onto that bandwagon was the feedback that was coming from the teachers was that I get that I have to get my kids to this being a Nipun child, being grade level competent having achieved foundational literacy and numeracy, but I don't know if the kid is moving towards that direction. I will get to know at the end of the year, right? What is an immediate assessment that I can do which will help me do it? One is to do a pen and paper, but how is that uniform? How is that informed? Hence we thought, okay, does an app help, a voice-based app where the child speaks, question comes, child speaks, and the teacher gets to know, okay, this child is now moving in that direction. That was the intent. Now it so happened that technology helps that. So it's never adoption for adoption's sake. It's more, is this solving this problem? Right? So today, the metric, for instance, in this app that we are looking at is number of unique assessments that teachers are doing, not number of kids that are onboarded or number of teachers who are using it.
That would be an output, right?
Yeah, of course. Outcome is, of course, FLN, that every child is foundationally literate and on numeracy and so on. Yes. So, like I said, the program is actually a combination of administrative and technical levers. One of them is this app, right? And of course, it is almost some 20 different odd interventions that are running. Better teacher training, better curriculum, better mentoring, better administrative reviews, better deployment of resources in terms of teacher trainers and so on. So like this, there are some 20 different initiatives that are running in parallel, of which one of them is this. The overall goal remains that it is foundational literacy and numeracy, for which we actually have a third party coming in and assessing. And it's not even the system doing its own assessment.
Yeah, but for a handover, when you said that, I think for Haryana, you now handed over to the Haryana government.
Yeah.
So what is it that told you that, okay, no more tweaks are needed, there must be something that we want to impact an X number of people and a percentage of X is going to impact?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Let me cover that in governance framework. Shall we move forward on this? Yes. So this is a governance framework, and part of this came about just last year, where we completed 10 years and we were thinking, how do we synthesize our learnings for others, right? So we came up with these, like great consultants, two frameworks. One is what we call the governance matrix, which is a tool to determine the readiness of a government, whether state, national, local, on driving outcomes. Is this government ready to drive outcomes? That's what it helps in. The second is the Panch Sutras for governance transformation, which is essentially 5 key principles for carrying out a successful governance transformation. If you want to move from point A to point B in the government, what are the 5 principles you apply that will move the needle, right? That's what it is. So let me cover one by one. I'll pause at each. I'll complete the governance matrix. We'll take some questions, and then I'll do Panch Sutras and we'll take questions. So first, on the governance matrix, right? We look at it as two axes. On the horizontal axis, you have political salience, which is essentially political will. Either the political system wants to do it, which is doesn't want to do it, low, and wants to do it and fully put their thing behind it, is high. And on the y-axis, you have system capacity. This is across people, process, and infrastructure, right? Are the right people there, and Are the right processes there, and is the right infrastructure there? That's also high to low. So of course this now becomes a 2x2 matrix. So if I go one by one, where a political salience is low and a system capacity is low, we would call that system to be comatose. Essentially, the energy of such a system is deployed in maintaining status quo. Right? And you can imagine all kinds of departments, government departments, and state governments and national governments, which are probably stuck at this stage. If you go up on system capacity, but the political salience remaining low, such a system is a sleeping giant, right? Which means there are good people, they have great processes, and there is infrastructure, but there's no political salience which is driving outcomes, right? So such a system essentially is able to deliver incremental outcomes. So they're doing good on an incremental level, step by step, they're moving forward, but it's not fundamentally transformative in nature, right? You could say, I mean, one could argue, I would probably put it in a different category, but one could argue that the railway system is been in a sleeping giant phase for a long time, right? There's a Indian railway service that is fully, deeply entrenched. The infrastructure is fairly great. They've been developing the technology over the last many decades. The processes are sorted and so on, but you don't see it fundamentally being great, right? It's incrementally getting better and better and better. So I would probably put that there. The third is where a shooting is what we call a shooting star, where political salience is very high, but the system capacity is low. The most recent example that I can think of here is our vaccination drive during COVID. One can very well argue that the health system in India is very low capacity, right? But we were able to achieve such high vaccination in a very short period of time. And that essentially came from political salience. Now, on a very political salience angle, this is not stable. It can keep moving up and down the x-axis, right? The government changes, you would move around the axis. Sometimes advocacy becomes so strong towards a certain cause, right? The Nirbhaya case, the India against corruption, so on. The political salience also builds through advocacy, right? Or the people also vote in a certain direction, and that also moves political salience. So it's not stable that you're here today and forever you're there. So that's the shooting star. Now, the fourth and the top category is that political salience is very high and system capacity is also very high, is a battle ready state. Now, this government is ready, this government as in a government in that category is ready for complex, driving complex outcomes, right? Probably Swachh Bharat would fit into that case, right? For the Swachh Bharat as a outcome, there was political salience and the system capacity was also built quickly to drive those outcomes in a short period of time, right? So that's how we are looking at this matrix. Yeah, let me pause here. Any questions on this, and then we'll move to the Panch Sutras. Susan has a thumbs up.
Sorry, so I have a question. This is
yes, Dia.
Just so I understand this difference between a shooting star and what you're calling battle ready. So something like a Kalia scheme, for example, in Odisha, would it be a shooting star? Would it be battle ready? I think that's something that you all worked on as well, right?
Yeah. So there are two parts to this question, but actually one, I wouldn't fit Kalia into this category because this is a tool to assess the government's readiness. Kalia is a program that the government is running, right? So the real question is where does Odisha lie, or the Department of Agriculture lie in this framework? Correct, right? Our assessment then was that they were battle ready. The political salience was very high. Like Susan was saying, Raitu Bandhu was announced there. Something was happening in different states, so there was also political will to kind of do something in that direction, and there was system capacity already because of the decision support system being there being a database of farmers, them having village level workers and so on, to be able to quickly move towards such an outcome. Then again, you can always kind of probably say, okay, that still puts it in a shooting star and not a battle ready and so on. So that's why this is a spectrum as opposed to it being some hard-coded box that you're always there.
Yeah. Most of the time, even to roll up your sleeve and build up the system capacity, you need political will.
Correct. Now, system, of course, to your point, Pavitra, building system capacity takes time. Political salience can quickly happen and quickly go back as well, but system capacity will necessarily be incremental in life, right? That's also where it goes back to our common characteristic of deeper reforms being over a period of many waves, as opposed to it being in 2 years we have everything sorted.
How do you measure political salience? How do you decide that something is comatose or shooting star?
Yeah, it's not as straightforward. It's a, for us, I mean, as Samagra, we have some mental models that we apply, but probably doesn't apply if you just look at it as an outside in. One of the things, that's why the CM's mandate being there is a necessity for us before we get into a program, that the CM has a buy-in of the program that we want to get into. We also look at what's the runway that government has. If there's an election that is coming up in the next 6-7 months, then you know the political salience is in a different direction, right? It's not in the direction that you would probably want it in. Or how much of a political instability that is there. Maharashtra being a classic example since we are here. So that's our mental heuristics. There is no, it's not a science of that this is a political salience, this is no political salience. You have to case by case test it out. That's why it's also a spectrum and it's not a box of its own. Yes, Siddharth.
Nikhil, would be great if you could share some examples of any signals that you saw from a government or, you know, any of your programs that helped you identify that, look, these folks are really committed. Like you said, political salience is the most important. So what are some signals or signs that are most important for you? Like you said, CM is one major force, but anything else anecdotally that you could share to help,
Let me give you the example.
Some examples.
Yeah, let me give you the example of UP. Since generally UP also has this perception that nothing happens there. So UP, before we started the education program there was already a lot of movement on education. The CM came in, he made education an agenda. How do we know this? Number one, he got the best officer, blue-eyed boy, to become the director of the department, right? Somebody who had delivered Kumbh for him. The first Kumbh that had 0 deaths, the first Kumbh which was most logistically well managed and so on. Right? So he's a 2009 batch officer, Vijay Kiran Anand, IAS. He made him the director. Right? The second thing that happened, there were multiple, because the UP state is so big, there are actually multiple directors in the education department, right? And all of them reporting to one very senior administrative secretary. So there's almost like a very senior officer, and then there's a mid management. There's nobody in between who's kind of tying all of it together. So the CM created a post called the Director General, made Vijay Kiran Anand the DG, so that he could bring all the system actors together, right? This was all before we even had started having conversation. So these are some indications, Siddharth, that the CM is willing to move different things which are not there today to get things organized and move forward. Right? And these are not straightforward things to do in the government in any case.
How often have you seen an increase in funding being so? Because my prior is that that's the only true way one can measure political salience.
Yeah.
How often do you see an uptick in funding being
in extending the UP example, they started asking for more funds in PAB, which is the central allocation from Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. As part of this, that also increased as soon as he became the officer. It was more structured, it was more focused on how they are spending it and so on. So to that example, when this happens, budget is a natural indication that this is going up.
Yeah, so
having said that, in equal number of cases, funding in our experience has not been the single most important thing. Even with existing fund, you can do a lot of things which is not thought of or thought through by the government themselves right now, because it's just inefficiently managed. So as a leading indicator, fully with you, but it's not sufficient. It's a necessary indicator probably. Yes, Mugdha.
So my question is that when you assess, okay, the willingness or the ability of a state to undertake a certain program. What gap do you see Samagra filling in there? So if there is political salience and system capacity at some level, the state government knows what they want to do and they have some sense of how to do it. What is the gap that Samagra fills in?
So again, there are two things that you're saying, Mugdha. On the first thing, that the system is already doing something and so on, this is not a tool that is telling us that the system is already doing it. This is a tool that is telling us that the system is ready to do it, not that they're doing it. All right. So that's one part of it. Where does Samagra operate? We operate on the right side of the framework, right? Because we are not an advocacy group, so to speak. We don't work on the x-axis. We are not in the business of building political salience, right? We are in the business of building system capacity. So we are either working with a shooting star or with a battle ready state. Of course, then goes back. Sorry.
My question is more about, let's say the UP government already has some education programs, or like you said, they are a shooting star, they're battle ready. They do have a sense of things that they can do. What is it that Samagra adds to that?
So in that way, what's the value addition that Samagra adds? What's the key USP, so to speak, is actually two. I will actually go back to Ajay's book, right? The one in service of the Republic. He has this framework of there is no market failure, but political will is in right direction. Then there are two conditions, right? Either the wrong intervention was selected or the implementation was lacking. These are the two places that Samagra operates in, right? There is a market failure, there is political will, you selecting the right intervention and driving implementation of that. That's where we operate.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so sorry, so before you come in, Siddharth, one more thing.
Sorry, not a question. I was just going to say that Nikhil, being modest, I mean, see, at the end of the day, why does any consulting firm exist? Because even if the government or entity know what needs to be done, often they lack the ability to do it, the people, or just the directed focus, right? I mean, here you have a team which is dedicated to this, working, full the entire week. Most government officials are not dedicated to one activity. So the dispersion of focus is often why consultants or governance consultants are useful, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. But one more point to Mugdha's thing. Like I said, even after Samagra starts working with the government, because political salience keeps moving up and down, that happens in our experience as well. We are also there for 6-7 years, right? It's not like the political salience is going to be stagnant at high. It keeps moving up and down. So we also kind of move around our work accordingly.
So I was actually going to ask you about that for Haryana, because you have the experience of 2 waves, right? And I would assume, because you work on the right side, it went from shooting star to battle ready when you handed it over.
Yeah.
So how did you measure that this was battle ready? I think that was the question.
Yeah, that you were asking. Again, it's not a science. How we do is, actually, let me hold off on that. There is one Panch Sutra around it. That's when it will become real as well. Let me not answer, then I will half eat my own slide. Shall we go to the next one then?
Yes.
Okay. So the next one is Panch Sutras of governance transformation. Like I said, these are 5 key principles of governance transformation, right? What does any successful program that has moved the system from point A to point B have as common characteristic, right? So I'll use Swachh Bharat as an example because that's kind of common knowledge. I could use other examples as well, but I don't want all of us to be on different pages. So I'll use Swachh Bharat as an example to just illustrate each of those points, right? So these are those 5 Panch Sutras: political will and bureaucratic championship, tangible and cascaded goal, a visible and credible progress towards that goal, administrative enablers for technical initiatives, and then finally sustainability levers, which is where I will answer this question. Right? Let me come one by one. So the first Panch Sutra is that a sustained political will and bureaucratic championship is a must-have, right, for any governance transformation. How did this play out in Swachh Bharat? Right from the Prime Minister himself, to all his cabinet ministers, to all the ministers, to all the chief ministers, to all the ministers in the states as well. Everybody was geared towards Swachh Bharat, right? There was a whole movement around this. There was active focus on also building, societal momentum to it. Celebrities were involved, wards were involved, sarpanches were involved, and so on, right? So just keeping that sustained political will was happening. On the bureaucratic championship, Dr. Paramayer, I don't think he's a doctor. Paramayer was brought on board. He is a senior IAS officer's 81 batch, I think, but he had quit the service, moved to World Bank to work on sanitation. He had worked in China, in Vietnam, in Thailand, and on sanitation specifically. He was brought on board, given a secretary level rank and full freedom to do whatever it takes to move forward with this. And because he was brought on board, it's also a contractual service, right? It was extended almost 3 times, if I'm not wrong, to keep that bureaucratic championship just there throughout this journey, right? And he had almost free hand, like I'm saying, to do whatever it wants. The budgets were made available to him. He could get his own team. He could get his own partners. He got Tata Trust on board. He started the Swachh Bharat Prerak and everything, right, to drive this program. So that's one critical Panch Sutra on governance transformation. The second is a tangible and cascaded goal, and this is important to keep all the system actors aligned towards that trajectory, right? What did this become? One, I'm speaking specifically on Swachh Bharat Gramin rural, right, where the goal became open defecation free, right? It was a tangible goal because you could see it in your village. Nobody's going out to take a shit, and it was also cascaded, right? How was it cascaded? It was a village first, that your village, nobody should go out for taking a dump, and that was tangible for everybody there. And it was cascaded. You first make your village ODF. If all the villages in that block become ODF, then the block becomes ODF. If all the blocks in a district become ODF, then the district becomes ODF, then the state, and then the country becomes ODF, right? So for every actor at each level, it's very clear. I'm not worried about the country. I'm worried about my district. I'm worried about my block. I'm worried about my village, right? That's the cascading, and that's the tangibility of it as well. It's not some mathematical formula of some score that I have to achieve, right, which I have to apply my mind to figure out how do I game the system. It's here and now. So that's the second Panch Sutra. The third is making visible and credible progress towards this goal, right, which helps in maintaining this momentum. How did they end up doing it in Swachh Bharat Gramin? They did it in 2 ways. One, they had this external party coming and assessing whenever a village says, I am declaring myself ODF, right? There are teams that are set up in different blocks. They go to each other's block, check it, and say, yes, I've done this assessment. Then QCI was brought on board to do a third party assessment of it and almost declare that, yes, this village is open defecation free, right? And what's the credibility was brought on board? Because there's a third party. How is it made visible? Whenever a village was declared ODF, right, it would become a big celebration in that district, right? The DC would organize a big mela, give awards to that sarpanch, give awards to that block development officer. Similarly, the state CM is doing something. In fact, the first 60 districts that became open defecation free were all awarded certificates and celebrated at the national level by the Prime Minister, right? So it becomes very visible for all the system actors, and the progress is also credible because it's happening third party, right? And that ensured that this momentum is continuing towards that direction. The fourth is administrative enablers. It was led with administrative enablers first, and it helps pave the way for complex and nuanced technical initiative. What does this mean? Look at administrative lever almost like plumbing in the state, right? It's a pipe that goes, which is very neatly laid out. There are no holes in the pipe that there is a lot of leakage. It's also a very efficient pipe in the sense that it's the right diameter, diameter and so on. And through that, now you can push technical initiatives, right? So administrative levers in the Swachh Bharat case, funding was sorted. There were, every state had the Swachh Bharat mission that was set up. There were directors who were brought on board for that Swachh Bharat mission. Later on in the phase, they got Swachh Bharat Prerak at the district level. Then they got Swachhagrahis further down. so that this pipe is almost smooth, that you can push any initiative through it. Only after all of these were set did this whole thing around, is it one pit toilet, two pit toilet, right, liquid water management system, sanitation system, and all come in. Because they had this pipe, they could push all of these complex initiatives through it. And that's why it's important to lead with the administrative enablers and then do technical initiatives. So that's the fourth Pansutra. The fifth and final one is on the sustainability side. This is you can almost create another framework of this on its own. But our understanding is that it is driven largely by three things: that you embed a new way of life for them. In the case of Swachh Bharat, you have a toilet, you no longer go out, right? It's a new way of life that you're trying to embed. You align incentives, right? And then you create institutional structures that this doesn't roll back into the older way of life. Right? Yes, it's too early for me to say anything that Swachh Bharat is a sustainable model and so on. But if these three things are satisfied, then we believe that sustainability has been successfully driven in that. Right? Like I said, it's another framework if we start creating it. So coming back, these are the 5 Pansutras of governance transformation, 5 principles that take a system from point A to point B. Oh, yeah. Let me pause here. Questions on this? Sorry, can I make a prediction? Let me write it down. I'm just writing down a theme that everybody is going to ask questions on, and I will show it later to prove that I predicted this.
Susan, unless you want to go first.
No, Susan doesn't want to play this game.
Now that there's a prediction, I'm not playing.
Okay, so my question is mainly around point 5. Okay, so even because we work in procurement intensively, the thing is, okay, when do you say, how do you say that you have created this sustainable system, right? Because often, okay, you have your one, you have two, you have all this in place, but that institutional memory to carry that forward is often not there. For instance, sorry to bring this example, but in Delhi Metro, we saw that initially there was political will. They used to get funding every time they asked, and there was big people brought up, like you said, for Swachh Bharat from all across the world to do this. But okay, first phase went well, second phase went well. After third phase, leadership changed, political will changed, then it went downhill. So what do you guys do in terms of ensuring that? I think it's a bigger question. I don't even know if it's possible.
Anybody had similar questions?
Just a follow on to this, that this is with regards to an institution falling apart. What about governments when they change? So we've often heard that big programs get shelved just for the sake of being shelved. So how does that affect the way you design your program, and how does it affect the way you carry your program forward also?
Anybody else?
So exactly what they said. Remember that you said aligning incentives is one of the sustainability levers. So I guess a key point could be who are you designing these incentives for? If the job profile design is such that these incentives need to be met, I think somewhere the institutional capacity gets built in space. But what other things, what other incentives, and how would you go about this?
Got it. Okay. Now that I have gotten some brownie points on this. So let me answer it in two ways. One, on using the Delhi Metro as an example. Right? Creating institutional structures, in our experience, is also a matter of how long does this new institution, so to speak, work and get these outcomes going. After a certain, maybe one generation, I don't know what the science behind it. After a certain number of years is when it becomes permanently a new way of life, right? For example, SEBI of today is not the same of SEBI 5 years after it was born, right? I'm sure they had 100 problems just 5 years after they were born, but today they have very different problems, but nobody questions that it's an institutional structure today. Right? Similar is the case for Swachh Bharat. It's not reached its maturity where it is a fully functioning institutional structure yet. The hope is that it will become. Hence, I said if we draw it out, then number 5 is probably another framework, another set of experience, and probably more deeper research even. Right? Because I don't know how do you drill deep down and say, okay, is everybody using that toilet for all the right purposes in the right manner and so on today. Right? So that's on the institution structure to your answer. On the incentives part, at from a very principled lens, it is looking at who are the actors who are interacting at the last mile. Right? In the case of education, it's the teacher, the school, the student, the parent, right? And probably the SMC. Right? In the case of health, it's the doctor, the hospital management, and the patient, right? And maybe the patient's relative who's bringing that patient. So figuring out who are the actors at that last unit of change and seeing how do you change that incentive is the critical part. In the case of Swachh Bharat Gramin, it's a more simplistic alignment of incentives because it is incentive for that household. Right? The discovery that you can peg building of toilets to the respect of women is a discovery that they made actually later in their thing, basis how it was getting adopted. The early successes happened because the DCs were able to innovate for the fact that women had to go outside, and that was very difficult, right? They had to get up early at 3 a.m. so that the other men are not around and so on, and then respect became a big thing, right? So that way it was that way a fairly easy incentive to come up with. Again, not easy from that point of view, I'm speaking more relative, but when you get into more transactional relationships across multiple actors, then it gets that much more difficult. Does that answer all the 3 questions? On political will, yes. It goes back actually to the time thing, right? Political will is never stagnant over many years ever, right? It is always going up and down for a given topic. Take women empowerment. One would say that today there is some political salience towards that goal, right? But it's not stable. You can always say there has been no politician who said it shouldn't happen, which is probably true. Do you take that as political salience? I don't think so. Right? So it will keep going up and down. Hence, it's a function of time that you have created an institution and you have embedded a new way of life. You've aligned all the right incentives that it no longer matters whether the political salience is up or down. That it continues its own journey.
I think Tamil Nadu is a good example in terms of the midday meal program scheme that they had. Right? It started way back, like Anna started it. But even when political, I understand it was only just DMK or ADMK, but they only one-upped each other in terms of the scheme. They never rolled back on the scheme.
Yeah, the most recent example I can think of when political salience was actually anti a system was Manrega. Right? Modi ji came in parliament and said, this is the most useless program that I've ever seen. He's still not killed it. He's increased the budget year on year.
Indira Canteen may be one example
where it was rolled back. Time is the thing there. The Amma canteen did not get rolled back because time, it passed a certain threshold. Again, I don't know what is that threshold. Maybe it's different for different state, different programs and so on. But there's a threshold of that becoming permanent. Siddharth?
So this process of transformation broadly seems to be top down, right? Which is that, the power, the money, the direction flows from the top.
Yeah.
Any examples you're able to recall of where the top down became bottom up, right? Because that's in some way the true success of the system, where irrespective of there not being a 5-year plan or, some grand central scheme which is devoting funds, there is still a bottom up movement towards this. Any instances that you can recall where this has sort of seen success, and there is sort of that embedding into the bureaucracy that even if there is no drive, the work sort of continues. One example that I can think of is, and going back to Swachh Bharat, there was this Swachh Sarvekshan, right, that happens. Yeah. And irrespective of whether now there is a money or there is some big award related to it, municipalities seem to take it seriously. Okay, whether they want to or not, they go do the activity. They they're not taking it lightly. It's sort of become ingrained into their DNA.
Yeah.
I was just saying, if there's any more examples that you can help.
Yeah, I can think of an education example. Again, this would require almost landscaping every scheme and service that has ever been delivered in the country. But I can think of education midday meal being one and Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan being the other. A lot of funds till date is actually channeled through Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan to the state, and because of that, a lot of work happens. Thanks, Diya. So that's the other example that I can think of, Siddharth, to your question.
Cool.
Sorry, you mentioned that there is a time threshold of institutional memory that helps with the handover.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is different for different industries or whatever problems is it that you're trying to solve. What are the rules of thumb or indicators you look out for that there is an institutional memory that's reasonably permanent?
New way of life.
Sure.
Both internal functioning and external functioning. Internal being how does the system work with itself, right? The checks and balances within. And external of how does it deal with that last mile, whoever it's intended for, right? So that's one thing. The second is incentives, of course.
Can you give an example of incentives?
Yeah, so like I said, in the Swachh Bharat example that I was giving, the incentive became women, and they channeled everything around women. I'd let half the population, every household has a woman, every woman needs a toilet. They said that's the incentive we'll take.
But what about bureaucratic and political incentives?
Yes, so in the again, I'm just using Swachh Bharat again and again so that we are all on the same page. In Swachh Bharat, the incentive was more financial for the person, for the contractor, that the government pays a certain sum of money for half the work done, and then another tranche of money for the full work done, right? And that full work money has to come from the household. Only half the money was, I think 6,000 rupees was paid for by the government, 6 more thousand was supposed to be paid for the individual, totaling to 12,000, if my number add up, right? So that was one thing. So the contractors were aligned that I'm getting money here, I will complete half, I get half the money, but for the remaining half I have to complete it. That's why you would also, I don't know how many of you have noticed, there are a lot of half constructed toilets, right? Because the household couldn't afford for the remaining 6,000 or didn't pay, whatever, right? So you see how the incentive aligned to the extent that it was possible, and then the incentive broke, right? So that's one example of how you sort of align incentive. For the bureaucrats, the incentive were actually these awards and visibility. Again, going back to the first 60 DCs, the districts which became ODF, Sachin Tendulkar was sent to that district. For any bureaucrat who's at a DC level, right, he or she is probably in their late 20s or early 30s. My age, our age, right? Sachin Tendulkar is a hero. I will do anything if he comes to my house. Right? So those were the kind of intensive incentives that were figured out internally. Of course, from a longer term point of view, you would of course think about an institutional structures which has its own checks and balances to do this.
Or building visibility on the same issue, but
over a period of time.
Returns.
Correct.
You will introduce, you publicize, then you go down. Then
correct. Actually, that's a very good example. The only example that I can think of where even a little change in that creates a big uproar is midday meals. One school or whatever small number of schools that gave salt with roti in UP, entire country was talking about it, right? Because that's become a way of life now. It's embedded, aligned, incentives are aligned. Institutional structures outside of the main government system, right? NGOs, civil society are all aligned towards good food in schools, right? Parents' incentives are aligned that मेरे घर में खाना अच्छा बने ना बने, school तो भेजना ही है बच्चे को. That's where they're getting nutritious food.
Yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you see the last point 5 as pretty much the end of
a transformation?
Of the transformation? Do you see that as the end?
That's a good question.
Or do you think that there is let's say, a circular quality from 5 to 9? I can think of one.
That's a very good question. Personally, from a Samagra point of view, I don't know the answer. Personally, I think it's circular. Because you have created a new way of life.
Yeah.
It's not like this will work for the next, 100,000 years. After 10 years, you'll have to create a new way of life, and then it goes back.
Now, I can tell you, it's a. I think everyone has opinion on this, but the example in my head is
RTI.
Yeah, like Shravani said, that
we are not at stage 5 at RTI.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
But now you need to rethink of a new way of RTI. Yeah, that's a very good point.
So yeah, I don't think. I mean, if there is like an end of history view with 0.5, I don't.
Yeah. Personally, I don't think so either. That's about it from my side.